who is most likely to perform better in a sales role. At 57% of extroverts who were hired, they showed below performance. Analysis is not analytics. Analytics is not analysis. How will you measure innovation? And today's topic is HR analytics impact on business, and something that aims at us being more future ready. CHRMP is a globally recognized certification. It is India's answer to SHRM and HRCI. We are talking about doing multiple consulting projects, certifying organizations and employees from various organizations. We are talking about close to 10,000 strong alumni base that we have. You should definitely like CHRMP page on LinkedIn. You would have some wonderful updates, wonderful blogs. blog.chrmp.com has a lot of information especially for people who are currently pursuing their graduations and post-graduations, right? This is a brief of where our alumni work. And now quickly coming to the topic.
Don't forget to press the like button and leave your comment. Share the video and subscribe to our channel for more HR-related content. To never miss a notification on our latest uploads, make sure you hit the bell icon.
I think this session, I would break it down into 3 parts. The first part is I would want to talk about some models of HR analytics so that you get an understanding of the structure at least. And then I would talk about how we can make HR more measurable. And then I would talk about the application of HR analytics in an organization. Briefly, these are 3 key elements. So basically, looking at an entire cycle of how analytics gets conceptualized to applied, right, is something that I would like to cover this up. Just in case I go too fast, ping in and tell me go slow. I'll try doing that. So let me start by first bursting some myths about HR analytics, because when we talk about analytics in general, I think business analytics, sales analytics, all that has been there for ages, isn't it? Right? Especially, last 15 years has been quite defining if you look at various kind of roles that are there in organizations. However, HR analytics is relatively new, right? And there are a lot of myths associated. One of the reasons why people choose HR also is that they feel that they're more of people's person and less of analytics, and that element comes in, right? So I would want to start by bursting some myths. That's something that is extremely important. And the first myth that I would like to burst is that HR analytics is for people who are really good with mathematics, right? I'm interacting with an audience which has given, I'm sure, CAT and various entrance examinations. So I'm sure your aptitude or mathematical skills is pretty good. However, when we talk about HR analytics, we are not really talking about very complex mathematics. We are talking about more of arithmetic and basic statistics, right? We are not talking about calculus or integration, differentiation, sine theta, cosec theta. That is not something that largely gets defined or gets connected back to HR analytics. So just in case, if this is one element that holds people back in terms of exploring this field, that shouldn't be the case, right? The second myth that I want to burst is that you need to be good with programming to become good with analytics, especially with HR analytics. So this myth is also very, very important for us to burst. So in fact, when Silicon Valley first conceptualized HR analytics, and this was in around 2009, 2010, because they realized that they are sitting on such good human data. And also with the new challenges that was coming up with different kinds of workforces existing in organizations, which was millennials and Gen X and Gen Y, and now I mean in 10 years now you have Gen Z also coming in, but they wanted to analyze this data, so they trusted the operations and the programming folks and the IT folks to be able to drive HR analytics, right? However, when a survey was done around 2014, they realized that almost 65% of solutions that were being provided through this data analysis was going wrong, right? And that's when, they understood that it's the human element and the HR understanding of human resource that is missing. And that's when analytics came back to what we call is the HR or to the talent department, right? And HR folks have done a great job in last 7-8 years, because the kind of solutions that we are talking about, the kind of problems that organizations are facing today, and the way data has helped us taking decisions, it has been awesome. So you do not need to know programming because you can run analytics on basic arithmetic and statistics. You really don't need to get into programming. You largely would interact with programmers to be able to come up with solutions, whether it's an AI interface or whether it's a AI merging with ML to come up with something, or whether it's something as simple as creating a AI bot or something as complex as doing sentiment analytics of highly qualitative data. You would be part of the framework in terms of designing a solution, but you would not be designing the solution itself in terms of programming, right? That's rarely seen. So that also is an important element that should not keep you away from this wonderful field of HR analytics. And another element is of whether analytics is very, very relevant to current HR roles or not. Because if you look at current HR roles, we are talking about people in talent development, or people in performance management, and people in recruitment or talent acquisition, or people in CNB planning, and a lot of other elements. So you have your set of things to do. Then how is it relevant to my current role? So again, research suggested that 7 out of 10 roles by 2025 would need analytics exposure. And these 7 out of 10 roles would necessarily not be the designation HR analyst per se, right? And that's largely because organizations would drive evidence-based HR practices. And this would require you to be exposed to areas where mastery of data, mastery of business partnering, mastery of evidence, and knowing how exactly to drive it would be important, right? So it's not necessarily that it would function as a COE. Like how talent acquisition functions, or how talent development functions. Yes, with the number of multinationals, number of Fortune 500 companies, that would be the case where analytics would function as a vertical itself, right? But to interact with other verticals, these verticals within HR would also need basic understanding of analytics processes, right? And for a lot of other organizations, otherwise, it would be part of the vertical and the department that we are talking about, right? So analytics is here to stay. It's not that it would not be relevant, right? So that's also an important element to take care of, and an important myth to be busted, right? Okay. So with this, I think let me get into the topic. And before I talk about models that is very interesting, let me quickly do a poll, and let me ask you all to vote for this poll. Who is most likely to perform better in a sales role, right? What do you think? Would extroverts do it, or would introverts do it better? You have 15 seconds to quickly go and vote. We have close to 100 participants, so I would quickly track that. Please go and vote. Who would most likely to perform better in a sales role? What do you think, right? Extroverts or introverts? Quickly, please vote. We have 57 votes. Quickly go ahead and vote in this poll. And people who have voted can start typing the answer in the chat box of why they feel the choice that they made in terms of extroverts and introverts is the correct one, right? Another 5 seconds, guys, before I close the poll and display the result. You can type in the chat box of why you feel extroverts would perform better in a sales role, or why do you think introverts would perform in a role better? Okay, so now I'm ending the poll. I have 74 participants who have participated, and I am sharing the result. So you can see, all of you can see the result. I hope you are able to see. We are talking about 68 out of 74 choosing extroverts, and 6 out of 74, 92% people believe extroverts would perform in a sales role better, and 8% people feel that introverts would perform in a role better. Let me quickly go to chat and look at answers. Introverts can do likely shy away from approaching clients. Okay, talking to people energizes them. It would be easier for extroverts to make connections with strangers. Extroverts for having confidence to talk and socialize. Wonderful, good points. Extroverts because they are more free to meeting people and engaging with them in making sales. Okay, anybody for introverts? Any inputs? Any thoughts? Any people who have chosen introverts? Anybody would like to type in anything in the chat box? Extroverts have added advantage over introverts as they can understand the expressions and feedback of leads in a better way. Okay. Okay, so nobody for introverts, but I understand the reason why you would have chosen introvert is not necessarily that you feel that you're an introvert, but maybe because you feel that they may understand requirements better, etc. But now let me astonishingly show you a result of an insurance company. I'm not even talking about where consultative sales are required, where solution selling is needed, right? We are talking about a company which is into insurance selling, right? And what they realized was that 57% of extroverts who were hired, they showed below performance in the performance appraisals that we are talking about. 29% was average performance and 14% was the success rate, right? I'm not saying that. This is a data of an insurance company which does personality assessment as one of the personality assessment as one of the hiring criterias and preferred extroverts over introverts, and this is the outcome that they got. Right now, this is kind of shocking, because if you look at sales, yes, all of what all that, some very valid points made, right? But then there might be certain things which might be changing, and maybe judging people on personality might not be a good thing, or maybe we do not have introverts data, so we don't know what kind of level. But certainly, if you are making a choice based on extroverts, it's not working well for the organization, right? Which basically means that when it comes to analytics, there is a clear fight between gut and data, right? And if you see, all of us used our gut. The 74 responses that we got on in the poll, we immediately used our gut in terms of responding to the question that was asked, right? The right way for any analyst to function would not use gut, because gut is anti-analytics. Let's understand that, right? And when I say gut is anti-analytics, what I mean is that always step back, look at something, want to know more, ask more questions, right? And then find out what is the data that is available, any reference point that is available, and then come to a judgment. We tend to come to conclusion too soon. And even if you are responsible for analytics or running analysis in your organization or wherever, right? If you come to conclusion, it would impact your analysis. Because if you have come, we have already concluded an X outcome, then we would only want to prove ourselves right, which means our data analysis would be compromised, because we would be taking sides, right? So one of the best way, and this is very important learning, the learning is that I do understand that a lot of times gut is an important element that humans have, and we should use it, right? But if you're analyzing something, right, it's always good to look at data, right? And when you look at data, have a very neutral way of looking at it, right? And then come to conclusions, right? And then maybe you can use gut based on the data in terms of future decisions or whatever we talk about, because otherwise sometimes or most of the times we may go horribly wrong, right? Yeah, that is one very important element that anybody in analytics or otherwise also, right? I think we should trust data more than anything else, right? Okay. Now with this, let me again talk about a very important differentiation, and the differentiation is between analysis and analytics, right? Analysis is not analytics. Analytics is not analysis. These are two different words referring to do two different things, right? So when we talk about analysis, we are largely talking about things that have previously happened or historically happened, right? And we are looking at analyzing them, right? Analytics, on the other hand, is not looking at what has happened previously. It is about looking at the future. It is about looking at or predicting, right? It is interacting with analysis data. It's not that these are mutually exclusive, right? They are interacting with each other. If you draw a Venn diagram, there would be an intersection, right? But largely we are talking about this. The outcome it is aiming at achieving is different. Analysis is looking at analyzing historical data. Analysis is looking at predicting what can happen in the future or what model can work in the future. That is what it is looking at. So when we talk about analytics, we have to understand that the entire journey is analysis plus analytics, right? And that's where analytics is a more popular term increasingly that is coming across, right? This differentiation and this understanding is extremely important for us, right? And based on this understanding, actually, a lot of models in analytics function. So there are a number of models actually. However, for the lack of time, I would want to introduce you to an important model and also some variations so that you understand the cycle completely. So one of the most popular models, or I would say mother of all model, is what you call is the analytics maturity model. Analytics maturity model basically breaks down the entire analytics journey into 4 steps, which is descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive, right? Descriptive and diagnostic are largely analysis steps, and predictive and prescriptive are largely analytics steps, right? So analysis plus analytics is the entire journey for any analytics to happen. And this is true for any analytics, not only HR analytics. This model is true for anywhere. It can function anywhere, right? The first step is to answer a very important question of what happened, which largely is done through descriptive statistics or descriptive analysis, whatever you want to call it, right? And once you start looking at the data, we are talking about answering another important question, which is why it happened, which is the next level of analysis, which is called diagnostic statistics or diagnostic analysis. So what happened, why happened? Once you have this answer, right? Just like, you know, for example, if you go to a doctor, the first thing the doctor does is to ask you, I mean, if you're unwell, then they would ask you about how you're feeling, fever, stomach, X and Y and Z, and then they might also write some test if they want to figure out more, and then they go to the root cause of the problem. And this whole process is, if you look at what's happening here, is describing or diagnosing. That is what is happening, right? The next step, once you are done with these 2 important answers of what happened and why it happened, is what will happen next. And this is where analytics come into picture. This is where prediction come in picture. And prediction are of 2 types, right? One is prediction and one is prescription, right? In prediction, you make you tell what is likely to happen in future, right? So for example, if let's say there is attrition that's happening, and attrition, if you look at very, very bullish hiring market today, especially for segments like in information technology, etc., we are talking about 152% job growth here. So if we are talking about in here, and we are talking about Fortune 500 companies facing attritions more than 20%, which was last heard of long back, right? So 25, 28, 30% attrition that we are talking about. So if somebody has to make a prediction, let's say, or could have made a prediction that this is something that is something that is supposed to happen, or let's say looking at previous data, if you make a normal assessments, right? We are talking about that prediction being one element, right? So if you don't change anything largely, right? I mean, this was an unlikely scenario, but otherwise, if you look at previous 5 years from 2015 to 2020, if you compare data, or if you do a trend analysis of 15, 16, 17, you can make a more or less a definite prediction of what quarterly attrition rates may look like, right? This is one thing. So you're making a prediction. The second element is making a prescription. Here you have an outcome to achieve. So for example, if attrition rate is, let's say 18%, and you want it to come down to 12%, then can we give a solution to the business where we are able to suggest policy changes, we are able to suggest whatever X and Y and Z that they are able to do to be able to reduce attrition rate from 18% to 12%. That is where solutioning comes into picture. And this is where the HR as a vertical becomes extremely important, right? Because the moment you start giving solutions to the problem that exists, whether it's attrition, whether it can be anything, right? We are talking about you benefiting the organization in more ways than one, right? So this is the entire cycle: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive, right? And this is maturity model. And if you look at a lot of other models, they're just a simple copy or with words changed, but more or less telling the same thing, because this is the journey that any analytics have to take. For example, if I look at Gartner model, right? I'm sure you would have heard of Gartner. They come up with wonderful reports year on year. If you look here, they talk about value and difficulty, and they talk about descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, right? So though I may object to the term descriptive analytics because that's largely analysis that we are talking about. But if you look at, they have removed the concept of diagnostic because they are largely, they have included that in descriptive, but it's very, very similar to analytics maturity model. Right? And it is nothing but it's talking about hindsight, insight, foresight, and it is talking about through information, we are aiming at optimization. And that's any which way is happening, because that if you look at prescribing or predicting, then you are looking at optimizing results. Yes or no, right? So very, very similar model. It's very similar to what we call is the maturity model. Or if you look at SAP model, right? And I love this model because it has something more interesting to add, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if you look at, this is what it is suggesting. It is talking about data, and then it is talking, now SAP does implement ERP, etc., right? So it is talking about, you get a data, then you talk about setting reporting standards so that you have standard reporting. And through that standard reporting, you come up with more advanced reporting where you can use various permutation combinations or to get data, and that goes to advanced analytics. But this still is answering the first quadrant, is still answering what happened and why did it happen, right? And the second model, where they are talking about predict and act, where they're talking about predictive modeling, they are talking about one very, very intelligent thing here, which is simulation, right? Which basically means run simulation to optimize, which means test run it before coming to a conclusion. Very, very important, right? This is not in analytics maturity model, though, you know, I mean, if you are prescribing, you would want to run a simulation in between, yes or no? So if attrition rate is high and you want to reduce it from 18 to 12%, then why not run it, right? On a particular location or a particular team, or you know, do a test run with one set of employees, right? And see the success before making more talent investments and more energy being spent in there, right? Very, very important, right? So if you look at, it's eerily similar. They're very, very similar to what we talk about in terms of analytics maturity. But yes, they have some hints which were and fine line which we need to read, but otherwise the journey more or less remains the same, which is describing, diagnosing, predicting, and prescribing. And in between predicting and prescribing, I think one very, very important element is of simulation, right? Which helps us optimize in a better manner. And that's how maturity in analytics is reached. And that is what you would do, right? So whether you go into reading trends or linking that back, always good if you can find a way to test run it or to run a simulation for that, right? Okay, so this is the first part of our discussion. The first part of our discussion largely is to understand in brief how analytics is taking shape, right? Now, the second thing is about linking it back to HR, where HR, how can we make HR more measurable? Because if we have to analyze, if we have to diagnose, if we have to predict, we cannot do it on assumptions. We cannot do it on gut, right? So we have to make HR more measurable, right? And the tool we use to make HR more measurable mostly is what we call is a matrix, right? Matrix, that is very, very important, right? And basically matrix is nothing but measure of any business activity. Anything that is happening in the business, if you are able to define it in a way, you are able to measure it, I think you have achieved your matrix, right? Now, the beauty of matrix here is that there are a lot of activities which are normally happening, right? And they're universally happening. So you can have universally acceptable metric, something like, let's say, an NPS, right? A net promoter score, right? But you may also have a business activity which is very, very specific to the organization or the department or the process itself, which means you may have to also create a metric just to make the whole process more measurable. Because if you do not make it measurable, then you cannot, what you can't measure, you can't manage. That's the logic, isn't it? Right? Measuring and managing go hand in hand. So yes. So when we talk about metric, it's very, very important that we understand that the best understanding of metric that we can create is to measure a business activity that is happening. It can be anything. It can be, for example, you're making hundreds of offers, but not everybody is joining in. So you can have an offer drop rate, right? You can have first year turnover. You can have anything. For people, talent turnover is different from attrition, because talent is people whom you don't want to leave, whom you want you to stay. So whatever you are aiming at measuring, right? Anything that you're aiming at measuring, the number of good resumes received versus total number of resumes received, in terms of what is the performance of an ad campaign or a recruitment campaign, whatever you want to measure. Eventually, if you want to make sure that there is an element that is coming in and you are creating a formula around it or a metric around it, we are talking about measuring that across, right? That is very, very important, right? So there are some metrics we know. So what do you think this metric is? So this is for you to guess. So type in your answers in the Q&A, sorry, in the chat box, right? What do you think this metric is? In the chat box, please type in, fill in the blanks. Attrition rate. Very good, isn't this? This is a attrition rate formula. What is the attrition rate formula? Number of employees who left the workforce divided by average number of employees into 100. Earlier, this formula was number of employees who left the workforce divided by number of, the average was first of month and last of month divided by 2. But now with HRIS systems, I think you can be very, very precise or very, very specific. One more formula that yesteryears was being used was number of employees who left the workforce divided by a number of employees as on 15th of the month, right? But I think this is the best formula, where number of employees who left the workforce divided by average number of employees into 100 is your attrition rate. That is what we are talking about, right? Another formula, let's talk about another formula. So this is attrition rate, very much. What is this? What do you think this is? Fill in the blanks. What do you think it is? Net promoter score? Yes, very much. This is net. NPS is net promoter score. So when we talk about net promoter score, this is a very important customer satisfaction metric, which was being used for customer satisfaction, but now it's also being used for employee satisfaction, right? In fact, it has become one of the most critical metric for employee satisfaction and employee engagement, right? Net promoter score. Who's a promoter? Just like you watch a movie or go to a restaurant, and if you really like it, what do? You promote it, isn't it, right? And if it doesn't matter, then you are more of a passive. And if you hate it, then you are a detractor, right? So, well, whether employees would promote your organization in front of others or not is very, very important aspect, right? So you go about calculating NPS. Anybody? There is a question here. So I want you to calculate NPS. Very, very simple, easy. Just for a warm up, you have to calculate NPS rating for 5,000 responses. I've given the formula. It cannot be simpler than this. So you know it is a net promoter score. You know there are 5,000 responses. You know there are 100 responses in 0 to 6 range, which is detractors. 500 responses, 7 to 8 response, which is passives, and 4,400 responses in 9 to 10 range, which is the promoter. So what do you think is the net promoter score here? Quickly type in your answers. Anyone else? Very good. Yes, it is 86%. It is 86%. 4,400 minus 100 divided by 5,000 into 100 is 86%. So you go about calculating the net promoter score. That's how you go about doing. So this is universal formula. So if you look at attrition, it is something that we know. These are metrics to measure HR, we know this universally they would be applied. So when we talk about an NPS, it's like remembering A plus B whole square. You just remember it, right? You memorize it. Even if you don't want to get behind the logic of it, you just get that right, right? So that is the way you go about calculating net promoter score, attrition rate, absenteeism rate, etc. Right? But then there are metrics that we need to create. And here I would want everybody's participation, right? Some metrics we go about creating, we know, and some we create. So for example, if you have to create a metric to measure performance from an employee engagement perspective, right, what would the formula look like? The hint is performance is equal to dash into dash into dash, right? So what would lead to performance, keeping in mind an element of employee culture or employee engagement in it? Try creating this formula. Try creating a metric for performance, all of you. Let's see whether you get it right or not. What do you think is the formula for performance from a perspective of culture and engagement, right? Think about it. What would lead to performance? What into what would lead to performance? What do you guys think? Anyone? Any answers? Anybody want to? Number of engagements divided by year into average attendance into morale, okay? Motivation into rewards into ability. Close, Anirudh. Anyone else? Quickly type in your answers. What do you think? Think about it. Performance. What would lead to performance? And in that element, we have to think about bringing in the element of employee engagement. Culture into motivation into rewards, okay? Employee satisfaction into motivation into culture, okay? Good guesses, good guesses. I know not a very easy thing in terms of thinking of performance and creating a formula for performance from this perspective. But if you look at formula of performance, an able person, ability, somebody having the ability, right? Somebody having the ability with good support and motivation. Motivation can come through rewards, motivation can come through incentives, motivation can come through other elements, support can come through policies, support can come through coming up with initiatives. An able person who is supported well through policies and initiatives and motivated enough through rewards and incentives would be able to perform, right? Does that make sense, guys? Right? Performance is equal to ability into support into motivation. Let's try with another formula. Let's try creating another formula. How will you measure innovation? How would you measure innovation? Help me with the formula for innovation. 60 seconds to everyone to type in answers. Formula for innovation. Creativity plus opportunity, okay? How would you measure creativity? Motivation divided by opportunity, okay? Innovation, measuring innovation. Number of novel ideas resulting in success, opportunity plus incentive, ability plus thinking. Keep it coming, another 30 seconds. Try. Anyone? Any thoughts? What would be the formula for innovation? Successful ideas divided by total ideas. Anyone else? Very good, very good. So yes, so look at formula for innovation. We are talking about number of successful product or process ideas divided by total number of suggestions. Formula for innovation, right? So remember, when we are talking about metric, what we are talking about is wanting to measure anything and everything. And how do you do that? You do that by creating a metric, understanding what is happening in the business process, what matters to us. That is very, very important, because otherwise there would be hundreds and thousands of business activity happening in the organization. You cannot go about chasing everything. What matters to us is what is aligned with the scorecard that organization wants to create, the goals that organization want to chase, right? So connected to the vision, connected to the goals of the organization, connected to the KRAs and KPAs and KPIs, whatever you call it, right? Whether you're using an OKR method or whether you're using a BSC method, whichever you are using, it does not matter. But if you have that clarity, we are talking about that being linked to what we want to measure. What matters is what we measure, and to make it measurable, we use metric. And there would be metric that would already exist. So you just pick up a formula from the repository and you start using it. On a lot of times, in analytics, especially in HR analytics, you would find that your business objectives are being or activities are different, and you may have to create a customized formula. So we need to, a lot of times you will have confusion because something that is already there, you feel, oh, okay, this is the one that I can use. But if you closely look at your business activity, you would realize, no, our activity is slightly different from what this formula suggests. So maybe that formula is looks very close to you, but it's not something that's measuring what you want to measure, right? So then we need to know how to make it measurable, and we do it by creating metric. That is very, very important, right? So first thing that we need to understand, I mean, so far we have busted some myths. We have understood the difference between analysis and analytics. We have gone about understanding models in analytics. That is very, very important. And then now we have talked about making HR measurable. That is also something that is extremely important, right? Now, coming to what is HR analytics aiming at solving in organizations? Let's talk about, and why it is buzz of town. Why, I mean, there are terminologies also, like you have HR analytics, you have people analytics, you have workforce analytics, people analytics. Technically, more or less the same thing in terms of how you would go about executing. It is about the larger differentiation is the level of access of data HR department is given, right? If it's largely HR data that we are talking about HR analytics. If it's going beyond HR and it's talking about some business data and other data, which otherwise was not made accessible to HR, now it's made accessible to HR so that they're able to do better analysis. We are talking about people analytics, etc. But largely the process would remain the same. If you're able to do that, you're able to do that. But what are the problems analytics is aiming at solving, right? And how relevant these problems are. So if I go to the next slide, look at the kind of problems that HR analytics is solving today, right? It is, we are talking about making better hiring decisions by predicting candidate success, right? If you look at, that's why, you know, if department names have changed, I mean, largely that has also happened because competency-based HR is being practiced, right? If you look at recruitment, is being called talent acquisition. If you look at training and development, is being called, or learning and development is being called talent development. Why are you changing these names? Because the way you want to analyze it, the way you want to see it is, I mean, not only the competency-based approach, which is looking at outcomes that we are talking about, but even from analytics perspective, when you are looking at, you look at the entire outcome that we are talking about, right? So making better hiring decisions by predicting candidate success. You're predicting candidate success. It's a very big thing. Prevent talent from quitting their job by predicting employee turnover. Test which employee policies are effective and which one are not. Very, very important, isn't it? You know, in fact, now there is an era of different kind of policies for different age groups, right? Different departments that is being taking shape. So it's not necessary that you will have the same policy applicable on everyone, right? Identify and quantify work accident risk. Shipping industry is using it. Manufacturing industry, analyst in manufacturing industry is using it. Logistics is using it, right? Analyze future workforce needs. Improve and optimize employee experience. Employee experience is very, very important. In fact, if you look at future of HR, one of my webinar, I think, should be available on YouTube or should be on CHRMP.com. If you go to resources, and under resources, you can click on webinars. I think I talk about future of work, where we talk about HR. And if you look at it's the kind of designations that you would see in times to come, you would have never heard of that, right? Or look at workforce scoping or employee experience. These are completely, it's gonna change the way HR is being practiced today, right? So yes, improve and optimize employee experience. You need to better the talent development strategy. We'll pick this one up, right, in few minutes for you to get exposed to it. Predicting ROI calculation on talent development initiative, very, very important, right? Imagine you are able to predict ROI. ROI is always, return of investment is always, you know, after investment has been made, can you calculate ROI? But if analytics can predict an ROI, wouldn't that be wonderful, right? Tackling talent scarcity, process improvement. Look at what LT and FT brings in, lead time analysis, or lead time equivalent or full time equivalent brings in, right? In fact, one of the activities we do in the certification, it reduces the manpower count from 44 to 39, right? Without impacting work at all. Can you imagine 10% reduction in headcount without impacting work by simple analysis. It's not even complex. It's simple, staggered analysis, right? That is something that you can go about doing, right? Optimize organization structure, improve company profitability per employee, profitability, right? In fact, one of the biggest case studies of success of HR analytics is of one of the most known food chains, which increase its revenues by 5% and profits by 3% using HR analytics. So better. So profitability, and HR was not linked to profits necessarily, except for trying to save some cost or looking at some kind of process improvement. But here we are talking about revenue impact through HR. Right, better compensation and reward decision, link HR action to business outcomes. These are all outcomes that HR analytics is looking at delivering to organizations today. And if I pick one of it, let's say one of it, one interesting one, which is predicting ROI, because ROI is a universal concept. Whether you are in HR, not in HR, they would always talk about ROI. That's a keyword that you would not normally see. Let me briefly discuss that. Right, let me talk about a predictive ROI calculation. Let me talk about a predictive ROI calculation. So let me first quickly, I'm sure a lot of you would know how ROI is calculated, but just in case you don't, I'll quickly tell you how ROI is calculated. What we are aiming at doing is predicting return of investment of a training initiative even before it has happened, and thus helping organization optimize this training spend. This is what the objective, the problem that we are looking at solving. But before that, let's quickly learn how ROI is calculated. So ROI formula is net benefits divided by total cost into 100, right? Net benefit is total benefit minus total cost. That is what it is, right? Net benefit divided by total cost. How is net benefit calculated? How is numerator calculated? Total benefits minus total cost is net benefits, and you divide it by total cost and you multiply it by 100, you know the ROI. Let me take a very, very simple example. If, and all of you please answer this because the bigger problem is coming next. So this is very important you answer this. If we pick up this artifact, which is a Harappan horse, I mean, obviously the original one would cost you millions of dollars, but let's say it's a replica and you buy it for 100 and you sell it for 250. What do you think would be the ROI? Net benefits divided by total cost into 100. What would be the ROI? What would be the ROI? Quickly type in your answers. Super happy with the quick responses from everyone. Yes, it is 150%. Yes, it is 150%. Net benefit is 250 minus 100, which is 150. Total cost is 100. So ROI is 150 by 100 into 100 is 150%. Would you want to do a business like this? Yes or no? Type Y or N. Yes or no? Yes, you would want to do it. It's 150% returns, 150% ROI that we are talking about. Great. Okay, wonderful. Now I want the same level of participation from all of you to solve this HR problem, right? A long-term training program is expected to reduce absenteeism by 10% for your company. The total cost of absenteeism was $10,20,000, right? In the previous year. Hiring a trainer would cost you $25,000 per annum, and additional cost would be about $5,000 per annum. A total of 15 managers will participate in the training for 8 hours a month for 12 months. Right? This is all the data that you have accumulated, you have created. So I'm bringing all the data together. I'm sure that there would be a lot of analysis that would have gone to bring this data together, but with limited time, this is what we can do. Average pay for a manager, including benefit, is $60 per hour. Benefits in terms of absenteeism can be seen for up to 3 years. Calculate the ROI and then tell me whether the organization, what would be your advice as an analyst? What would be your advice? Should the organization go ahead with this initiative or not? Right? Pick up calculators, pen, papers, laptops, whatever you want to. You have 2 minutes to solve this. And tell your answers. Tell me what the ROI looks like, and also tell me what would your advice be. So I want the answer in ROI, comma, yes and no, right? What do you think? 2 minutes to solve this. ROI formula is net benefits divided by total cost into 100. Data is given, and you can You have to calculate the numerator, divide by denominator. Numerator is net benefit, denominator is total cost, multiply it by 100 and tell me the ROI. Net benefits divided by total cost. Net benefit is total benefits minus total cost. Cost elements are here, benefit elements are here. All has been put together with some research. Okay, we have half a minute now, so quickly put in your answers. What do you think is the ROI and what should be your suggestion to the business? Anyone? Not very difficult. Okay, I'll close it in 10 seconds. Anyone else? Great, wonderful. Good, so wonderful. Let's look at the solution. Yes, we talk about total cost. And when we talk about total cost, that is very, very important to get to the denominator. And we are talking about trainer getting $25,000 per annum. And we are talking about managers, which is 8 hours into 12 into 60, which is about 86,400. And we are talking about an additional cost of 5,000 per annum. So the total cost comes to about 1,16,400. That is very, very important, right? And then we are talking about total benefits. So when we talk about total benefits, we are talking about estimated reduction of absenteeism to be 10%. The total cost of absenteeism is 10,20,000. So basically the reduction is 10% of that, which is 1,02,000. And one very important element is to see how long the impact would last, right? If you look at the last para, that is what it says. Benefit of the absenteeism can be seen for up to 3 years. So now this 3 years is something that you go about adding, which is 3,06,000. And that's your total benefits. Next you do is a total benefit minus total cost, which is net benefit, which is about 1,89,600. That is your net benefit. And then you go about calculating the ROI, which is net benefit, which is 1,89,600 USD divided by 1,16,400 USD into 100, which is 162.88 or 163%, and a definite yes to go ahead with this program, right? I'm so happy so many of you have guessed it right. People who didn't guess it right, this is the way you go about doing that. But what we have learned here is to be able to predict an ROI before investment is being made. If this is the visibility that analytics can give to business processes and systems, then I think we are in for a long run, isn't it? Right? Okay. So I think I need to have a Q&A as well, but let me just quickly end up by saying that every dollar that is spent in analytics is giving a return of about $13. This is a study done on 167 of Fortune 500 companies. And as I said, 7 out of 10 roles in HR would require analytics exposure, and 68% of MNCs would have a dedicated HR analytics center of excellence, right? Just like how they have talent development, etc. So that is where we are talking about, because this is the visibility we are able to give in, right, to businesses in terms of implementing and solving so many problems otherwise for the organization, getting into a solutioning and a strategic role. And that's why more and more organizations, you're seeing the CHRO designations coming in, isn't it? Right. So this is what we have discussed today. A quick recap. We started with busting some myths. We also talked about differentiating between analysis and analytics. We talked about some 2 or 3 models in HR analytics. We talked about making HR measurable. And we talked about application of HR analytics in terms of a real world scenarios. And in between discussed some top problems that HR analytics can solve. Now, this is what we have discussed today. I now leave the floor open for Q&A. So you can raise your hand and I can give you mic access. So that is something that I can do. And probably we can interact. Yeah. Anyone, any doubts, any questions, please feel free to ask. Please raise your hand. Anything you would like to know? Anyone, any questions? Are all good? Great. Wonderful. So I think Nehal, I think we have come to the end of this session.
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, there were a few questions. I don't know. Just a second, sir. There might be some questions.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
We can wait for a minute or two, and
sure.
If not, then
you can raise your hand, and the moment you raise your hand, I would give you the talk access. You would then be able to talk to me, or you can also type in your questions in the chat box.
Sir, we do have a question in the chat box.
I can see from Kishore. How are qualitative variables like productivity and employee morale amongst others quantified. So yes, I think again, you need to look at parameters which define productivity and which you define employee morale with. Employee morale can, for example, you have a lot of surveys and intelligently built surveys, right? Which go about doing a 360 analysis in terms of various aspects that people today look at the work, the organizations to cater to, because these parameters also have been changing. For example, what people wanted from the workplace 10 or 15 years back, those parameters are completely different today, right? What people wanted from 30 years back, that's completely different from what people wanted 15 years back. Yes or no? So if you're able to bring those elements in, right, and make them very, very realistic survey, and then you are able to not use just one tool, but maybe use something like a triangulation where data comes to you through at least 3 sources, which makes it much more trustworthy rather than just doing one survey and then analyzing results. Then we are sitting on a very, very realistic data because it has been tried, tested, and collected from multiple sources, right? So then it makes it start making sense, right? It becomes trustworthy and start making sense. And these all get quantified. All get structured. It all get numbered. It all get measurable in terms of how you want to go about doing it, right? But the key here is to set up the parameters right and use right tools to collect data. That's very important. Very good question. Please ask. So yes, I mean, you can say, for example, if we talked about NPS, so does NPS have an industry standard? Yes, we can say that NPS has an industry standard. But when we talk about one industry, does it vary to another industry? Yes, it may vary to another industry. So industry average is largely, or industry standard is largely what you define by, let's say, average of important players in the market, right? Of what you foresee or what is happening in there, right? Now, from an employee engagement perspective, it's a very, very challenging area to be in, because what is initiative today or appreciated today is an expected norm in few years, right? For example, if a particular initiative is being taken by an organization today, it is something that's a differentiator between two companies. But then if it starts working, then, you know, it becomes, it's something that people expect an organization to offer, right? Yeah. So it keeps on changing. So you have to understand that the clock is moving, right? And industry standards also keeps on changing with more additions coming into picture. But yes, if you look at industry standards, then important parameters like NPS, or you know, if you look at compensation connects, when that gets connected, or if you look at trend of top 5 trends why people are, or best places to work in trends, then yes, you go about talking in terms of industry averages, etc. But I always advise, when I'm consulting with organizations, to know their organization the best, right? Because if you are able to, and there are very, very surprising stories, right? For example, one of the organizations we were consulting with, they saw attrition rates jump by almost 6 to 8% for about 2 years at a stretch, and this was really, I mean, the business continuity was hit, etc. And they looked at industry trend, and compensation was at the top 3 or top 4 trends. But when they dig deeper into the data, and compensation being one, growth opportunity being other, respect at work being another reason, I mean, the 5th reason out of 5, which was surprising in terms of that. But when we looked at the data of the company, we realized that a particular age group, 2 particular age groups are seeing more attrition. And one age group where attrition was seen, which was slightly worrisome, was women in the age group of 28 to 35, right? With more than 10 kilometers away from office. Right? The distance was more than 10 kilometers, right? So analytics can go to that extent. Now that doesn't connect back to industry average, right? It is your average, it's your organization. So if now you have to solve a problem, then you need to change your hiring policy in terms of hiring people who are closer to work, or making it more flexible for women who are in a particular age group and staying a particular distance from office. It can be that specific issue, and everyone.
Thank you for the answer, sir. Sir, also I do have some questions which the students have submitted. If you allow, I can ask a few of
Yes, yes,
them.
please do that, Neha.
Okay, sir, we have a question here. How can HR analytics be used to educate, upskill, and bring a cultural change among the new employees who are entering the workforce?
Again, look at what challenges organization is facing. So analytics would finally look at solving a problem. So first, it's very, very important to define the problem. For example, if somebody new is joining an organization, what are you aiming at? Solving time to productivity, which means the time the person takes to be productive, or you are looking at solving culture connect, right? Or how the person mixes up with culture, whatever. If there is a problem, if your analysis to your organization would indicate a problem. Now, if these are, let's say, two identified problem for new joinees, then if you want to reduce, then you need to set a target, which means that, let's say, time to productivity is 60 days and you want to reduce it to 48 days, right? So now you need to come up with a solution in terms of what is, so an analysis would now give you inputs in terms of how it can, where does the problem lie, what can be done to improve time to productivity, can something be done before joining, can something be done after joining, if something has to be done after joining, then what can be done. So you will work towards solutions like this, right? So you have to first identify the problem, you have to identify where you are looking at, aiming at, or what you're looking at solving, and then you need to, and problems will get solved through regular HR stuff. For example, talent development initiatives can solve this problem, right? Cultural initiatives can go about solving this problem. Better assessment and personality tracking can help you get the right kind of people. Use of better tools, like for example, we do a lot of BI implementation. In fact, you should, if you go to CHRMP.com, you'll find a lot of information on that as well. So BI is behavioral engineering, which is competency based, which is very, very different from traditional interviewing, right? And that is the crux today. Any unicorn today is looking at in terms of implementing it in their organization, and even traditional companies are now aiming at driving by changing this process. Now, where did this come in? This came in because analytics was not really helping the right kind of people being hired, which was increasing the productivity time, etc. So you wanted to correct that, right? So you didn't only work on making things more productive, you also worked on making sure that better people come in who can be more time. So you can then hint at two solutions, one for the hiring process and one for the upskilling of new hires. Otherwise, yeah.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is, what kind of changes have you seen into the industry post-pandemic, and how are you like managing those?
Yeah, very, very important question. Actually, this is, so we are all very excited about the kind of data HR departments are sitting on in last 1.5 years, to be precise, right? And some of it is coming out in open. So basically, see, to make us largely, if you look at a true certification would aim at bringing in, it would be very unacademic, I would say, right? Because it would be very, very industry specific, because the truth about academia is that, you know, you do research, and by the time it becomes a PhD, and by the time you make it part of a curriculum, etc., it is already 10-15 years, right? Certifications. So being part of consulting and being part of certifications, we are like badly looking at, you know, aiming at the kind of data that is there. Very, very little is right now available. But some important points to ponder is that 16% of entire workforce today across the globe, right, and all organizations have completely gone remote, which means 16 out of 100 companies today in the world are functioning absolutely remote, right? One data to really look after is that what defines a multinational company, because the data that we are sitting on indicates that there would be democratization of hiring, on offshoring, outsourcing at a completely different level in 3 years from now. In fact, starting maybe it has started. For example, if Accentures and Oracles and Facebooks and they were having offshores in India and outsourcing hubs here, and they were talking about that segmentation would completely change. So that you would need now a complete different strategy on diversity, on inclusion, on multicultural workforce, to the extent which the world has not seen, right? In fact, the best of companies which proudly in their advertisements talk about how many nationalities are, they have not seen that kind of, and the cost impact, right, is something that is very, very interesting to watch on. So one area that it would really, really go on impacting is this. The another area of analytics that would change is that it would use a lot of AI and ML in times to come. So for example, it's predicted that in another 5 years, 7 to 8 of the recruitment jobs would perish in HR because those elements can be completely automated, right? For example, recruiters looking at resume, matching resumes, all that is something that already we have a lot of solutions which are there. Is just little costly, it would become cheaper, and you would see that. So these are 2 or 3 areas that are very, very interesting to look at. The third element is mental health, right? Mental health of employees of working from home, and the options that organizations create, right? And the successes that it has in terms of coming up with centers where people can go and work, or coming up with holiday destinations where people can go work out of, for catering to Gen Z and millennials mainly, right? So these are 2 or 3 areas where you would see lot of analytics input to drive organization investments here on employees.
Thank you, sir. That was a great answer. So the next question we have is, how are qualitative variables like productivity and employee morale, amongst others, are quantified or kept a track of?
Okay. I did answer this actually initially. I did talk about employee morale. I did talk about, so I think this question was from Kishore. He typed it in the chat, right? That was the first question I took in, Nehal.
Okay, sir. Fine, sir. That's it then.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? Any questions anybody would like to ask before we close the session for today? Okay.
Sir, just one more.
Yeah.
Sir, we also have a query that how can a fresher who is just starting with the analytics can make a career in the field?
So it can see. So let's understand that human resource as a topic itself is not very complex. Human resource is a very, I would not call it extremely easy. I mean, don't see it from an academic perspective in terms of how we prepare for examinations and what we have seen in the last 16 years of your lives. But HR is very, very commonsensical. It's very, very simple. It's not complex. It's not nuclear science or physics we are talking about, right? It's simple. So analytics also is not also very complex, right? So it does not, and analytics is the new field. So anybody who puts in effort and energy in a topic like analytics, or in an area like analytics rather than a topic like analytics, I would say, would be there in for long run, because you will start your career wherever you start with an analytical mindset for human resource, right? So when so many people would be using gut, you would be trusting data and using gut, right? So that would pave way for a lot of things that you would bring in, because what you would bring on table is solution-based approach. What you'd bring on table is what would work, right? You would bring on table is strategy, right? And it does not matter whether you have experience or you do not have experience. What would matter is the approach that you take. So evidence-based HR practices is the approach that anybody interested in HR has to take. And that comes through understanding data better and driving data better. And yes, and you have, I mean, we have a wonderful certification in HR analytics. If you're looking at, you know, and a lot of freshers do it from top colleges. In fact, that is almost 30% of the entire crowd. And in some sessions, we have a CHRO and a fresher attending. So imagine the kind of, so you need to put in energy, and because you can also learn things through experience. However, with experience, time gets invested, right? So what you could have achieved in 2 years, so it's the sooner you start, the better it is. So your analytics journey should start now. It shouldn't start 2 years down the line or 5 years down the line. No, that's not how it should start. On one hand, attrition rate in IT industry is so high. On other hand, they are hiring record numbers. What role can HR play in this case? Yes, Shobham. So yes, there are 2 or 3 reasons for this, and especially happening across the globe, but especially if you look at whenever I'm interacting with audiences, I think this is one question that comes in. So yes, so there are 2 reasons to it. I think one reason is that there was a lot of complacency in terms of how things were happening in IT, right? And also last year there was fear with the pandemic in terms of what may happen. But I mean, there was a joke floating around, right? What led to the digital transformation of the company? Was it who led the digital transformation of the company? The CEO, the CTO, or the COVID-19? So yes, COVID-19 drove and if digital transformation started happening for so many companies which needed this kind of IT infrastructure and IT input, then obviously there is unexpected, unseen growth. And how long this growth last would be interesting to see. So hiring in record numbers is happening right now, right? And because there are more jobs and more players that are emerging, people have these options where people are quitting, right? So yes, so it's going hand in hand. The way HR can play a role in this is by what you call is a short-term workforce scoping, right? So what is workforce scoping? We need to understand. So for example, identify 5 designations where there is highest attrition. Identify 3 competitors to whom you are losing your talent, right? And build in a strategy, a quick strategy, stitching around solutions to the 5 designations and 3 competitors, right? And solve that problem first, right? Because that would take away a big chunk of load for the entire organization and would stabilize things, right? Whether that solution includes creating initial hierarchies, coming up with the performance bonuses, if not definite salary hikes, or giving them certain kind of opportunities, certain kind of softwares to work on, whether you want to spend them on training, whether you want to make them part of MDPs. It's up to, there can be many solutions, and those solutions would only come through better data analysis. But my advice to anybody who's aiming at solving this currently is zero down on 5 designations where maximum attrition is happening, zero down on 3 competitors. And this is the analytics that you can do in such uneven scenarios which are unseen, which can last anything between 6 months to 2 years. I hope that answers your question, Shubham. And any more questions, anyone?
I think we are done with the questions, sir. Thank you so much for answering all the questions, and the session was very insightful.